Three levels to an excellent spirit. Three levels to an excellent spirit. And those of us who are deep Bible readers, you know exactly where I'm going to be speaking from. And if you guessed Daniel, you guessed right. I'm going to be speaking from the life of Daniel and what I have been learning really over the past year. I'm going to speak throughout the whole book, but my main verse that I'm going to be focusing on is on the screen here, Daniel 6, 1-3, and really the third verse there. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these three presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Father, I thank you for this time. I just pray right now that you would open the eyes of our heart, open the eyes of our understanding, open our ears, and I just pray that you would give us your word, help us to be receptive to your word. I pray for everybody on this call. I just pray, Holy Spirit, that your anointing would come upon each one mightily. I pray that you would help us to hear your word, help us to hear your voice. I pray that you would bring healing, Lord, to people who need healing upon this call during this time. And I just pray that as you speak through me, I pray that you would stir us up, stir our desires for more of you, and stir our desires to grow deeper in you. Thank you, Father, that you hear us, and thank you that you're with us. In Jesus' name, amen. So when we look at power structures, right, there is always a hierarchy. And the way Babylon was structured is very similar, right? The king appointed the highest level of rulers, which were the presidents, and under them the princes. And this passage says that Daniel was one of the presidents, and he was the first among the presidents. But then when we read further, we see something very interesting. We read that even above these highest levels, the king decided to promote him even further. So what that meant was the king actually created a new position above the highest positions and just to promote Daniel, right? So this was not because of Daniel's education. It was not because of his knowledge or skill or qualifications or achievements. It was only due to one reason. It was because he had an excellent spirit. And the last verse of this chapter, chapter 6, says that Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius. So it's amazing that Daniel, just because of his spirit, he was preferred, he was promoted, and he prospered, right? And this is even more amazing when we realize that Daniel was over 80 years old at this time. And also he was in exile in Babylon. He was taken captive as a boy, and he was living there as a captive in exile. So to me, when I read this is amazing. And it also, to me, it's like, I want this excellent spirit, right? I want to be preferred. I want to be promoted. I want to be prospered. I want to be like Daniel. But then it raises a question in me. First of all, what is an excellent spirit? And how come only Daniel had an excellent spirit? And why only him, right? There were a lot of other Hebrew boys who were taken with him that God was with as well. But it was only in Daniel that this excellent spirit was found. And more importantly, for me, is it possible for me and for you, for us, is it possible for us to develop this excellent spirit? So God gives everyone a spirit that's of the same quality, right? So we all start with the same spirit that comes from God. So there's something that Daniel did extra. There's something he did to reach this level. So it starts by understanding, what is our spirit and how does it differ from our body and how does it differ from our soul. So just like our body and mind can be developed and made stronger, our spirit can also be developed, right? So just like if you don't work out for a while, you're going to start to see that your body is going in a weird shape. Or if your mind is not kept sharp, you start to see that you're losing your memory, or you're not able to engage with other people. So as soon as we start to see that, we go and work out, we go for a walk, or we go work out in the gym. And then when we look in the mirror, we can immediately start to see improvements in our body. And the same way with our mind as well. But the problem is that since our spirit overrides our flesh so much of the time, most of us never distinguish that the spirit is distinct from the soul and body. And so we don't know that there's things we can do to develop our spirit, right? So let's start with establishing first what is an excellent spirit, and then talk about how to level up and how to grow in the spirit. So if we look at just a dictionary definition of excellence, it says excellency is the quality of being outstanding, right? But then more importantly, when we move to a biblical definition, when we try to understand what does the Bible say about an excellent spirit, Proverbs 17:27 helps us, right? So this says that he that hath knowledge spares his words, and a man of understanding is of an excellent spirit. So from this, we come to know that a man of understanding is a man of an excellent spirit. And if we look at Daniel 1:17 also says, God gave Daniel knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. So we see that what the Bible says about Daniel's own life also validates this definition of an excellent spirit. So now we come to how do we develop this spirit, and how do we know that we are growing in this pursuit to developing an excellent spirit. So as I look through the life of Daniel, I see 3 levels to the excellent spirit. So some people sometimes get upset when we talk about levels of moving to another level. But just to simplify it, anything that you can grow in has levels, right? So if we believe that we can grow in our spirit, if we believe that we can grow in our Christian walk, that means there are levels that we can grow in. So it's beneficial for us to know what these levels are and how they differ from each other. So the first level, I'm titling it Standing Out Through Sacrifice. Standing out through sacrifice, right? So we defined excellency as being outstanding. So if outstanding is the end result, then where does it start? So if you want to ultimately be outstanding, it starts with you standing out right now. So you have to stand out in order to be outstanding. So this the statement may seem very simple, but just to make it a little more deeper, you have to make the decision to stand out now in order that others might perceive you as outstanding later. So how do we start to stand out through sacrifice? It begins by setting your heart to do it, right? So Daniel 1:8, it says that Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself, right? So it starts with a desire, but then that desire needs to be translated into purpose. So as I go through these, I'm going to make a series of I am statements that help to illustrate this process, right? So when I say it starts with desire, it starts with I want, right? I want to do something, and usually it's a good thing. And then that I want, it needs to move to I will, because it's no use of having a really good desire if we don't really do anything about it, right? So for example, we read the Bible and we see Jesus would wake up early morning to pray, right? Or we hear these stories of great men and women of God who would wake up in the morning to pray, and all of us at some point were like, okay, I want to do that, right? But then if we don't, if it just remains I want, and if we don't actually make that a purpose, if we don't do things to position ourselves to do that, we are never going to actually do that, right? So secondly, there, stating intent to do something helps you to follow through. Because without this, if you don't state your intent, it's easy to give up, or it's easy to be swayed by someone else's words. So next morning, if I want to wake up, I'm going to feel sleepy. I'm just going to hit snooze, and I'm not going to, go through it. And we see here too with Daniel in verse 10, when he actually went and says, I want to stand out and I want to sacrifice. I'm not going to eat this. In chapter 1 and verse 10, we see that the prince of the eunuchs, he actually discourages Daniel. He says, if you do this, you're not going to look good, and then the king is going to chop my head off. But Daniel had purposed in his heart. So it was easy for him to stand his ground and say, no, I want to do this. The other principle here is, once you purpose in your heart, God starts to act on your behalf, even though you cannot see it. So we read in chapter 1, God paved the way by bringing Daniel into favor with the prince of the eunuchs. But Daniel didn't know this when he purposed in his heart to do it. So the principle here is, if we don't purpose in our hearts, we may actually deny ourselves the favor of God and for things to move. So this is actually a deeper spiritual principle. So I'm going to go a little deeper on this because I think it's important. Most of us cannot see what happens in the spiritual realm, but it's critical that we understand what happens. God operates in the realm of our thoughts, not in the realm of words, right? So this is illustrated in Daniel chapter 10, verse 12. The angel comes to Daniel and says, from the day you set your heart to understand and to humble thyself, thy words were heard, and I have come in response. So it's interesting that the minute Daniel actually set his heart to pray, God already released an answer. So God listens to your heart, and he reacts in response to that. Another example is in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 13. It talks about the fall of Lucifer. And it says, for thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. He didn't even have to say anything. God perceived the thoughts of his heart and immediately banished him from heaven. So a lot of times we may not see things happening in our lives, and then we may give up, but we lose out on the breakthrough, right? We need to purpose and follow through, and then only then will we see God has already prepared the breakthrough. But how many times have we not taken hold of it because we just didn't act on our purpose? We had a desire and never did anything about it, and we never saw anything happen. So the other principles with sacrifice is that you cannot be set apart without sacrifice, right? This is easy to understand as a concept, because if I don't do something different, if I don't give something up, if I don't say I'm going to be different, I'm obviously just going to look like everybody else, right? In every situation, there is something that we can sacrifice. So these guys were in exile. They were captives, right? So it wasn't that they could go to the king and just dictate terms to their captors and say, hey, we don't want to do this, or we want to do that. And also they were in a group with the king's own sons, with the best and brightest people, in that place. So there had to be peer pressure as well. And they were probably looked down upon the others as well because they were captives. But the point is, in every situation, there is something that you can sacrifice. And this is important in our lives because, we may always think that, where's the time? I get up, I go to work, I work whole day, I come back, there's only time to eat dinner and sleep. But if these guys, Daniel's and his friends, could find something to sacrifice, even in that position where they didn't have any opportunity to do so, then that's something that we can think of as well. The other principle here is sacrifice helps us understand our assignment and gift. So if you look at Daniel 1:17, it says that um, after they had sacrificed, it says that God gave Daniel knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. So if we are stuck and if we do not know, God, what is my gift? What is my assignment? What do we want to do? This is something that we can try. Sacrifice, standing out, giving something up, and see what happens. The next point is sacrifice sets us on the road to our destiny. So Daniel had understanding, the word says, in all visions and dreams. And we see throughout his life, this is what he was known for, right? So sacrifice helps us to understand the path that God has laid out for us. Even Jesus, being God, he had to go to the wilderness for 40 days and night fast to set apart and to sacrifice before beginning his ministry. So this is more of a spiritual principle. It's not something isolated, just in Daniel. So again, if any of us are in a point where, I don't know, God, what you want me to do, I'm kind of stuck in my life, this is something that we can try and see what happens. Sacrifice comes with a test. To really prove the value of sacrifice, it has to come with a test. So here in chapter 1, verse 12 of Daniel, we see the test being 10 days of standing out from others and sacrificing. It's also interesting to see that Daniel was the one who came up with the test, not the prince of the eunuchs, not the king. He was the one who said, we are going to do this test. So sometimes, we are often waiting for God to speak to us and say, okay, go and do this fast or go and do this. But a lot of times we might have to just step out and tell God, I'm going to be setting myself apart. I'm going to sacrifice this and I want you to move. So a test increases your faith and proves to others around you what happens when you stand out. And then finally, sacrifice brings blessing. So when we seek God and the things of God to the exclusion of everything else, he gives us everything else. We're all familiar with Matthew 6:33, which says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And this is, again, a very important principle. But it's also interesting that God blesses us in the proportion of our sacrifice. So if you look at Daniel 1:14, it says that they were tested and they did the sacrifice for 10 days. And then when we move to verse 20, we see that when the king examined them, he found them 10 times better than all of the others, right? So it's in proportion. They sacrificed for 10 days, they were set apart, and God made them 10 times better than the others. So this is one of the reasons why we sometimes struggle, right? We're not willing to sacrifice. We find all the reasons why we don't want to give something up for God, myself included, right? And one of the things that surprised me once, I heard some friends of mine, this is about 10 years ago, a couple of friends said they're going to do a 40-day fast, and I had never done anything like that. So I was really impressed. And I was asking them, how are you going to do this? And then they're like, no, we're not giving up everything. We're just giving up chocolate, right? And the other person said, oh, I'm just giving up my favorite TV show. And it wasn't even a good show that you should be watching in the first place. But the principle, not to say that that's not good, that is still good. But the principle is, when you're only willing to give up this much for God, don't be surprised when you only get this much in return. That's why when we see God moving powerfully through someone, we can always know that this person has made the sacrifice. This person has paid the price. So as I go through these levels, I'm also going to talk about markers. And I think this is important, at least for me, because I often think, is this all there is? Is there more growth? So sometimes it helps to just have some practical indications of, am I growing or not? Or is there another level to grow or not? So in level 1, as you're developing your spirit through sacrifice, through fasting, and all of these things, we are still going to struggle to hear from God, or we don't hear him consistently. Our confidence level is also low, right? We always say, did I really hear from God? Was that God, or was that me? Was that Satan? Was that something else? We also find at this level, we need external support. We often will say, we go to our brothers and sisters and we'll say, please pray for me. I do not know whether to take this job. I'm going to fast for 2 or 3 days. Please pray for me. Please pray with me that God will speak to me, because we are still not strong in our spirit. Also, it takes time to hear from God. This happens because God speaks to our spirits. And if our spirit is not well developed yet, obviously we can't hear that very well. So it takes extra time and focus. So now when we look at the life of Daniel, we see the same thing. He needed external support in chapter 2, his first test of interpretation. He had to go and ask his friends, please pray for us that God would give me the answer. And he also did not get the answer right away. He had to go and seek God, and then God gave it to him in a dream in the night, and then he was able to speak that, right? And then he also he had to step out in faith. At this level, your spirit is still just growing, so nobody really knows who you are. So you have to step out in faith and maybe ask and negotiate, right? So we see here that Daniel had to first go to Arioch, and then he's like, what's going on? Why is the king trying to kill everyone? He had to understand what was going on. And then he had to go and seek an audience with the king. And then after that, he had to negotiate for more time. And then he was able to, he made that statement in faith, but then God came through, right? So we see all of these things just being displayed because Daniel is only now growing in his spirit. And then the final marker in level 1 is as you're starting to grow, your level of influence is over individuals. God will use you for individuals, and you proclaim things over individuals. That's why we see in his first tests, Daniel always spoke about King Nebuchadnezzar and what would happen to him. So initially, you just speak over individuals. Now, as you go on then to level 2, I call level 2 character and influence, right? So we started with desire and purpose. I want, becoming I will. The key word for this level is I must. It moves to discipline, right? So the key word is discipline, because it's easy to start. It's easy to say, okay, I'm going to wake up for 1 week every day at 5 a.m. or I'm going to and pray, or I'm going to do a 3-day fast, or I'm going to separate myself for TV shows for 21 days. That's easy to start with, but how many of us are actually disciplined to keep continuing in this? So as we persist, as we have discipline now, we start to become different, right? So earlier when people looked at us, they saw us, but now they start to say, okay, there's something different in this person, and we start to see as we pray, things start to happen. As we are around certain people, things start to happen. As we enter a room, things are different. And there are certain places that we just cannot be in anymore. There are certain people we just cannot be around anymore, right? So we start to change. So in this level, as we are disciplined in our pursuit of God, he now starts to trust us more. I learned this truth last year, that God loves everyone equally, right? God died for everyone. He died for the world, not just for Christians, but he does not trust everyone equally. You have to earn God's trust, and this only comes through discipline and obedience. There is no other substitute for this. There is no other shortcut to that. And as we develop more trust, God reveals more to us, because you have to be trustworthy for someone to reveal more to you, right? Even with our own friends, the more we grow in our friendships, the more we know our friends really well. As we grow in friendships, they start to trust us more. It's the same thing with God. God reveals more to us, and it also becomes easier now to hear and discern. So in chapter 2, Daniel had to wait for a long time to get the revelation, to get that knowledge from God. But now when we see in chapter 4, when Daniel is called in, he gets the answer pretty quickly. He gets the answer like it says in 1 hour he got it, and he was able to tell the king. He didn't have to go and tell his friends, go and pray for me. He didn't have to seek God for a long period of time. So, your discernment starts to become quicker and more sharper. But the other interesting thing here too is, in the first level, Daniel had to actually go and step out and say, please give me time, I will do this. But now we see that Daniel was himself called. They called him. He didn't have to go and ask to be called, right? But he was still the last person. After everybody else had failed, he was the last person that he called. So we see that your spirit is still growing, but it is still not very well known, or it doesn't speak, it doesn't go before you, rather. The other thing that we grow in this level is we grow from visiting the presence of God to abiding in the presence of God, right? So in the first level, we experimented. We said, let me fast for one day. Let me wake up at 5 a.m. for 1 week. We visited the presence, but then when that time was over, we withdrew and then we went back to our own lives. But now we abide in the presence, right? We continually have discipline to set ourselves away from the things of the world. And so wherever we go now, the presence of God goes with us. This is like when Moses came down from the mountain, when he was with God, when he went away, the glory of God went with him. This is when people start to look at us differently and things happen around us differently. So what are the things in this level that we can continue to do to practice abiding in the presence of God? We continue to wait on God, we meditate, we fast, we pray, we sacrifice, and we obey. What God tells us, we obey, right? This verse from Joshua 1:8 is when Moses died, and God was sort of commissioning Joshua and giving him instructions, right? He said, this book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein, for then shalt thou make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. So we need to continue to practice these disciplines, and we need to be doers of the word, not just hearers of the word. So what happens now is, it's like there is the flesh and then there is the spirit, right? So most of us, when our spirit is not even awakened, we don't even know it exists, and our flesh is up. But as we start to do this, what we see is our spirit now starts to come up a little more and our flesh starts to go down. And all of us have seen this in our life, right? Our desires change, our habits change, and then it becomes easy to seek God. It becomes easy to sacrifice. First time to do a 21-day fast, it's crazy. It's very, very difficult. You have to win the mental battle. But once you do it, it's easy to keep doing it time and time again. And again, we've all seen this. We've all seen this in our own life as well. So I wanted to give this example of this guy called Daniel Nash. He's one of my favorite revivalists. He was part of the 1830s revival in the US. There were 5 great revivals in the US. This was in the 1830s. And Daniel Nash, he operated, if you haven't heard, he operated with a guy called Charles Finney. And both of them were, had ministries, but it was not at all fruitful. But then when they came together, God started doing crazy stuff. He poured out his spirit like crazy. Revival started happening. But Daniel Nash never spoke. Charles Finney was the guy who spoke, but Daniel Nash would always pray, and he'd be in some room praying. And when Charles Finney entered any town for a revival meeting, Daniel Nash would go a week before and he would just pray. And when he prayed, he would just pray for 3-4 days at a stretch, not eating, not doing anything else, and then things would happen. So it was a very serious thing if you got onto Nash's prayer list, because something is going to happen to you. So there's this example of he always liked to go into the forest in the early morning and throughout the night to pray. And one place he was in the middle of the forest praying, and the way he prayed was just so powerful, so intense that it would be heard a long way away. So there was this one guy, this is early in the morning, one guy more than a mile away he lived. And he just woke up and he came out of his house. He was not a Christian. And he just heard this prayer coming from a mile away on the airwaves. And something just stirred up in his heart. And he just did not have peace that whole day. He just felt so convicted. And before the day ended, he came to Christ and gave his life to Christ. So this is the difference between abiding in the presence of God and praying from the presence of God versus, just doing a regular prayer. Just, God, pray for me, bless me. And then, we wonder why things don't happen. We have to abide in the presence of God and be persistent. Abiding in the presence also brings growth in character. Now, this is important because in the first level, I talked about sacrifice bringing clarity on gifts and assignment, but we also need to develop the character to go with it. It's really important because when we start to see God using us, when we start to have influence and authority, it's very easy to fall, right? There are too many examples of men and women of God who are highly anointed falling because pride and self-righteousness and some of these things come in. So we need to just constantly abide in the presence of God to grow our character. And character is only developed over a long period of time. And it cannot be done without the Spirit of God. So I was wondering, how does the Spirit, how do we develop character? And this verse from Isaiah 11, verse 2 and 3, gives us insight into how the Spirit of God actually helps us to develop some of these things. It's obviously talking about Jesus here, but it says, the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord, and shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. Now we see Daniel reflect this, right? So as he grows in wisdom and understanding, we see also how his character is developed along with his gifts. So in chapter 4, verse 19, this is when he got the interpretation for King Nebuchadnezzar, and it was going to be, the king was going to be driven away for 7 years, live in the field, become like a cattle and stuff like that. But we see how he reacts with compassion. He's actually dismayed over what might happen to the king. And he didn't need to do this. He could have easily have said, this is what happens because you took us captive, you took the things out of the temple of God, you put it in the temple of your pagan gods. He could have easily rejoiced at the judgment that came upon the king. But we see how he reacts with compassion because the Spirit of God is upon him, and his own spirit is starting to be developed and growing. And also in verse 4:27, we see how he has counsel and wisdom. He actually counsels the king, turn away from your ways, seek righteousness, do these things so that what this judgment, what God has said will not come upon you. So we see, with the verse from Isaiah, we see how the Spirit of God is helping Daniel now to grow into some of these character attributes as well. When you look at chapter 9, verse 4 and 5, you also see the humility of Daniel, right? So this is when all his gifts are operating. He's really powerful, but he identifies himself with the sin of the people. He goes in sackcloth and ashes, and he pleads for God's mercy upon them. Another characteristic in this phase is we start to see our influence shifting to people around us, right? So Daniel obviously was the ruler of the Hebrew gang of friends, but we see now as his influence starts to go over them, they start to see their own lives change. They start to have miracles happen in their own lives as well. And a lot of us have seen this as we start to grow, as our spirit starts to grow, the people who come around us start to be influenced and impacted by the anointing upon us as well. When you pray for others, things happen, suddenly people are being healed. Suddenly, we see your anointing and gifts start to being imparted to other people as well, right? So this is another thing that happens in this level. And some of the markers in this level are, as we grow in discipline and as our spirit is growing, our perspective changes, right? We suddenly become more eternal focused rather than temporal. And this only happens when we continually separate ourselves from the things of this world and abide in the presence of God, right? But this can be a miserable state. I've been in times in my life when I forced myself to go, I want to go and be in God's presence for 2 hours, or I just want to somehow pray. And it was not a very enjoyable feeling. So, unless we find joy in this pursuit, it's going to be a miserable experience. So we have to move from desire to purpose to discipline to love, right? So it's I want to I will to I must. And now we grow to this point where we love the presence of God so much, and only then will we just want more of it. So when I miss one day with God, it's not guilt anymore, but I just miss the presence of God so much. The other thing we start to see here is our reactions change. So when we go through trials now, and by the way, trials are not going to stop, they're just going to get bigger, right? But we observe, we're not asking God, why am I being faced with this? We start to say, even if you don't deliver us from this furnace, you are still God, as these guys said. Or we start to say that God, I praise you because my testimony is being developed through all of this. So, I was reading about, one of the martyrs of the faith was a guy called Dr. Rowland Taylor. He was killed in 1555. This was the time when a lot of the popish rituals were coming into the church, and he stood against them. So they burned him at the stake. He stood for the truth and he was killed. But right before he died, he said, I say to my wife and I say to my children, the Lord gave you to me, and the Lord has taken me from you and you from me. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I believe that they are blessed who die in the Lord. Trust in him by means of our dear Savior Christ's merits. Believe, love, fear, and obey him. This echoes what Job said right after he lost everything. He said, the Lord is given, the Lord is taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, in Job chapter 1. So this is it doesn't just happen, and it's very difficult unless we are growing in our spirit, because in our own strength we can never say anything like this. And then finally in level 1, level 2 is, in level 1 we saw our influences over the destiny of individuals. But as we grow and as our influence spreads, now we start to proclaim the destiny of nations. So in Daniel's life, he started by really talking about King Nebuchadnezzar and his life. But then when we move to chapter 5, as Daniel is growing, we see now he proclaims the destiny of nations. He talks about the whole nation. Tonight, you're going to be deposed, new nations going to come in. That's because God starts to trust us more and starts to elevate us to, elevate the ministry to reach a greater number of people. So then we move to level 3, and this is the last one, and I'm calling it favor and authority. And this is obviously the level where we go into an excellent spirit as well. So keeping with our I am statements, we started with I want, and then I will, then I must, then that became I love. And now finally it ends with I am. At this level, everything we've done, the discipline, the consistency, the ability to sacrifice, the fasting and prayer, all of that, it becomes who you are, right? We stop to become a man, and this is when people start to call you man of God or man of an excellent spirit. And the key word for this level is consistency, right? It's easy to be disciplined, but only for a short period. Consistency is for the long term. And it's very easy to understand, but it's very difficult and also frustrating to put it into practice, right? For example, when I went through this phase when I just set myself apart from everything for two months, and I did a 21-day fast, God just revealed so many things to me. Supernatural became, everyday part of everyday life. My eyes were open. God revealed his glory. And then 1 week I had to travel a lot for work, and I didn't have the time to put into it. And then when I came back to it, I found now I had to start all over again. So that's the frustrating part, but it also tells us that we cannot do it in our own strength, right? But consistency is very, very important. So this is when everyone knows you as this guy who is always doing this, right? So everyone knew Daniel. This guy is going to go every day, 3 times a day. He's going to go at this time. He's going to face the certain direction, and he's going to pray without fail. You can set your clock by Daniel, right? You start to become known for that, and you start to inspire other people. The other marker in this level is authority, right? So as our spirit grows, we grow in his authority as well. So Daniel begins to grow to this level where speed and discernment is the highest level. So there is no need to wait to hear from God, because your spirit is now one with the Spirit of God. And earlier we had to wait for God to speak, but now whatever you speak, that is God speaking through you. So that's a little difficult to understand sometimes, but if you look at Daniel chapter 5, verse 17, Daniel says, this is when he was called to read the writing on the wall, and the king says, I'm going to give him gifts and all of that. Daniel says, let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another, yet I will read the writing unto the king, and I will make known to him the interpretation. So if you notice now, Daniel is not saying, I will go and pray to my God whom I serve, the God of heaven, he rules, he will give me the discernment. He doesn't say all that. He says, I will read the writing, I will make known to this interpretation. Now, certain people who don't understand this may say, okay, he's arrogant, he's not giving credit to God. But at this point, you are so one with God that whatever you're speaking is the Spirit of God, is of the Spirit of God. The other example here is if we go to Exodus 14, verse 13 through 15. So this is when Moses got the Israelites out, but now they're faced with the Red Sea, right? And Moses is on this high, right? Because he saw everything that God did. And he says, fear not, stand still. You will see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show today. The Egyptians that you saw today, you will see no more. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. It's a very good statement. It's a statement of faith. It's a statement that God will come through. But when God reacts, it's very interesting. The Lord says, wherefore criest thou unto me? You speak unto the children of Israel that they may go forward. Why are you asking me? You speak and they will happen. So sometimes we will never move to this level because some of us, we will always for our whole life just be waiting for God to speak, waiting for God to act. But God is asking, why are you crying out to me? You do it. You have the authority. In my name you shall trample the serpents and the scorpions, right? So we have that authority. And when you go to Luke 9 also, it's interesting because this is at the beginning of the chapter. God gave them power and authority, sent them out. They went and they did amazing things and they came back. So they're on this real high. But now suddenly 4,000 people around them, and they go to Jesus and say, please disperse the crowd, let them go away. But Jesus replies, very interesting. He says, you feed them, right? So Jesus is testing them to see which level are they at, but they fail the test because they do not even realize that they can actually do that. And then Jesus actually had to do that. From their reply, it showed which level they are at. But it's very, very critical to be one with the Spirit of God, because otherwise we cannot handle this kind of dominion as a human being, right? So it doesn't matter who is on the throne, what your situation is. It doesn't even matter if you're surrounded by lions. At this stage, you have this unquestionable dominion by virtue of the excellent Spirit that is in you. The other verse is, if you look at John 1 verse 12, it talks about the difference between being a child and a son, and the key difference there is authority. John 1:12, it says, but as many as received him, to them he gave power to become the sons of God. So we don't automatically just become sons. He gives us the power to grow into the sons of God. So, there's a difference between being a child of God and being a son of God. And what is the difference? The difference is authority. Because a child cannot speak in the authority of the father. If the child goes and says, my father said this and that, they'll say, go call your father. But the son can speak, the son can act in the authority of the father. The other marker of this level is that the favor of God and man is on you. Right? In the first level, Daniel had to go and take effort to avoid being killed with the other wise men. But now the favor of God and man is on you, right? That the verse that we started with says Daniel was preferred above everybody, and the king himself set him up over everybody else. The other marker here is you don't need to speak or to fight. Others fight for you and others testify on your behalf. So Daniel 6 verse 14, it says, this is King Darius. It says, the king was severely displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. This was when he was going to be put in the den of lions. And he labored to deliver him. And the king also said, thy God, whom thou serve continually, he will deliver thee. So we don't see Daniel speaking much here. And in chapter 5, we also see the queen goes in front of Belshazzar and talks about, there is a man in thy kingdom in whom is power and light and understanding and wisdom, and he can interpret dreams and visions. If you call Daniel, he will interpret the vision. Right? So as Daniel is growing up, as he is developing this excellent spirit, we see that he also does not speak much, and others speak for him or on his behalf. And it goes back to the definition that I started with in Proverbs: he that hath knowledge spareth his words, and he that hath understanding is of an excellent spirit. The next marker here is intimacy with God. So consistency with prayer, sacrifice, and fasting brings us so close to God that he calls us greatly beloved. To me, this is worth everything else. You know, all the other stuff is great, but just to hear God call you greatly beloved is amazing. And this happens in Daniel 10. This is again during this time of Darius, when he's starting to get the visions. The angels come to him and calls him, "Oh man, greatly beloved." And in my own life, I have seen this when I have sacrificed so much, when I have just separated from everything. I have come before God in heaven, and God himself has looked at me and called me greatly beloved. And it is the most incredible thing. It's worth everything. So when we started, level 1, we were visiting the presence of God. Level 2, we were abiding in his presence. But now we are no longer just abiding in his presence. He is now delighting in your presence. And that is just amazing, right? For God to be delighting in our presence. The other marker here is, as you grow in authority and dominion, you also face greater battles. So greater sacrifices bring greater battles, right? So we see that Daniel didn't stay at that level of sacrifice we saw in chapter 1. Initially, it was just like 10 days. But now we see he goes for 21 days with ashes and sackcloth. So this is another just tip for myself and for all of us. If we are feeling that doing the same thing is starting to feel like a routine, just change it up. Add something, do something different. You know, God is a creative God. He speaks very differently. First time I did a 21-day fast, it was incredible. And then next time I went, I was expecting the same thing, and I was sort of upset that, God, I'm not getting the same experience. But God gave me a completely different set of things that he showed me, right? So God will speak in very creative ways. So we have to be open to that. You know, we just need to look at the sunrise every day to know how creative God is. But some people are scared of this for some reason. I've had couple of people tell me, I'm scared to press in deeper. I don't want to press in deeper because I'm afraid the devil is going to come after me, harder. That might be true, but not always. But we also have to understand there's a difference between a private and a general. What is the difference, right? The private is fighting in the front lines, and then there are bombs falling all around him. He's still fighting and he's still winning the victory, but he's not surrounded by protection. But if you look at a general, he never goes alone. There's always like 4 or 5 mighty guards around him, right? You are more heavily protected. You are more heavily defended. So there's nothing to be afraid about to go and press in deeper. The other thing, other marker here is an excellent spirit brings prosperity. We read this in Daniel 6:28, that Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus. Earlier, all through the life of Daniel, it says that the king made him a great man and he set him over a lot of provinces and things like that. But now it says Daniel prospered. And then the final marker here in level 3 is your degree of influence grows. We started with God using you to proclaim or to act in individuals' lives. In level 2, that extended to a nation. And now in level 3, that extends to the entire world. And we see that progression in Daniel's life. As God trusts you more, as God reveals to you more, Daniel was able to speak about the destiny of the entire world. And we are still waiting for some of those things to come to pass. So those are the 3 levels, and these These are things that I've seen myself grow in, and it gives me something to keep pressing in, to keep pressing on, and to know that, okay, I don't have to stay in this level. There is something more, right? So when we possess an excellent spirit, it is not that we are not going to go through the fire. It is not that we are not going to be amidst hungry lions. Indeed, we might have to go through these things in order to prove our faith and to develop our spirit. And God may not always quench the fire or slay the lions, but He's always with us. When we have an excellent spirit, we can see beyond. We don't look at the armies of the enemy surrounding us, but we can see the chariots of fire around them that are mightier, that are more numerous, and that are for us. We don't see just the pride of lions around us. We see the angel of the Lord who encamps around us, and we see that they are shutting the lion's mouth. We don't keep struggling to hear or to discern what God is saying, but we hear God saying clearly to us, "You are greatly beloved." That alone is worth it, right? So we have a choice, right? We can keep struggling with spirits of mediocrity, or we can step up to another level. And at this time, with everything we're going through, it's time for us to desire more. It's time to hunger for the deeper things of God. It's time to be set apart. It's time to exchange the ordinary things of this world, to get the excellent things of God. And for me, at least, and I pray for all of us, it's time to level up to an excellent spirit.